Welcome to the Rustic Garden. Today is July 23rd. Wanted to give you a quick tour. The peppers are doing outstanding. My plants are loaded with peppers, and I'm actually going to harvest a lot of these. I'll show you the I'll show you the harvest at the end of the video. But what I'm really going to do is go through my tomato plants that have been pretty much beat up from the high heat we've been having from early blight. All kinds of black cherry tomatoes in there, lots of cherry tomatoes. And what I've been doing is really going through and marking down this year which tomatoes do well in the heat, which tomatoes don't, which ones are more resistant to the early blight. And I'm going to grow fewer tomatoes next year. And what I do recommend is that you keep a journal and keep track of when diseases come into your area. Jot down what tomatoes do well. Like for instance, this is a bumblebee. It's doing extremely well with the early blight and with the heat. This large cherry tomato is doing pretty good. The small cherry tomato in there is not doing well, but I'm going to go ahead, harvest the tomatoes out of here. The black cherry got something different where you can see a lot of die-off back there, but it's managing okay. I did pull out the black plum that was in there. I've also grown tomatoes in different areas, so I'll show you the yellow pear, and in two places it's doing the same thing. This is the experiment where I was growing plants in this tray with water in it, and what I found in my area, more so at this time, the humidity from the water created a great environment for leaf spots. So some of the tomatoes are doing well. I've thinned them out, I've pruned them back, so I've removed any kind of problematic leaves, and I've been spraying them. And I've also taken some of the tomatoes out of there to give them some room. And you can see the remains of leaf spot on there. So I'll continue to spray these and, take care of them with the hopes that they'll grow through August and I'll get a lot more tomatoes. But the tomatoes are doing pretty good in there. We come over to this side. I just planted a new tomato in here. This is Sweet Millions. It's a cherry tomato. And what I do recommend is to really go through your garden, find spaces, and plant tomatoes at different times, because as some of these are being beat up by the hot sun, the hot temperatures, the early blight, my new tomatoes are doing really, really well. So if some of these die out, I'm still gonna have tomatoes growing through August and September. Looks like something came in here, chewed down all of my kales, my flat leaf cabbage back there, and that was really me. The white flies were coming in. The leaves are a little bit bitter now during the high heat, so I've pruned them all back, cleaned out the bed, and these will come back, and I'll do videos on this in the next couple of weeks, and the new leaves will be moving into cooler weather. The white flies won't be around, and I will have some sweeter leaves that will grow through fall. So this is going to become my fall garden, so I'm starting to transition over. In here used to be a bunch of wildflowers, raspberry vines, and you can't see under there, but I just planted some hop vines. I'm going to be growing hops. You can see back there some of the vine, and these came out of a nursery, and for the first 2 weeks I need to keep shade cloth on them so that they don't get damaged from the sun. This is the area where I'm growing my 1-pound tomatoes. I'm going to have to pick some of these, but they just got devastated by the early blight, and I'm going to do a video to finish up the 1-pound tomatoes, and I'm pretty much going to cut the string on some of these vines, drop the vines, and bury them. And although the series really was a fail in the sense that I'm not getting any 1-pound tomatoes, a couple of large ones, and I've been picking some of the red ones off of here, because of the diseases, because of the way the warm weather came and hit here, because of the way the rains came, the disease was just too much. But I'm going to try and save these so I can get tomatoes again through August and into September. The peppers are doing really, really well. They're going to get sprayed. Nothing has shown up on them yet, knock on wood. But pepper plants have been having a great season this year. While the tomatoes have been suffering, and peppers have been doing pretty good. Some more tomato plants. That's the that's the Midnight Snack, a tomato that I'm doing showing in a series. The vines back there just got shot in a series. They're doing well. They were fed with Epsom salt and with fish emulsion, and they look great. I've been spraying them with a peppermint spray. Again, cleaned out all the weeds out of these beds, sprayed down my kale. I may cut those back. They will grow back if I do cut them back. So come September, I'm going to have sweet leaves again. So I'm really, really getting ready. And you can see the different work that I'm doing in here. Okay, let's go to the other side of the garden. A couple of tomatoes that I put in later than the larger ones, they were also hit with the early blight, but they're getting sprayed and they're being managed and they're doing okay. But the idea is in your zones, you may want to put in tomatoes at different times so that they kind of grow through the problematic periods. This is the large squash, squash that I'm growing in large containers. The squash in here weren't producing well, so I went ahead and I dropped a couple of seeds. I'm going to do the next video on this series, thin these down to one. But when you have struggling plants, sometimes it's better to pull the plant out, just put in new seed, because the healthy emerging plants are going to grow much faster, be much healthier than trying to nurse back a sick plant. Coming up here, some more tomatoes getting beat up. You know, I've been harvesting a lot, so I'm getting tomatoes, but they're not thriving like I want them to. And this year like I said, I'm keeping track of the tomatoes that are doing pretty well. Going to keep those, and I'm going to really reduce the number of varieties that I grow next year. In this space I had cabbage, just dropped down a bunch of radish seeds. Within a week they've popped up. I'm going to thin them down to about 1 inch to 2 inches apart. And I did drop in some new cucumber seedlings back there, and I'll be doing a little bit of a series on here. But I'm getting ready for my cool weather crops. That's asparagus, looking extremely green, extremely healthy. Neem oil came. Neem oil was sprayed and took care of a bunch of beetles that were chewing this down. But after you harvest neem oil after you harvest asparagus, you got to let some of the spears mature, fern up, grow, green up, and then they will recharge the roots for next year. Cucumbers in there, doing extremely well. More squash, growing vertically up a trellis. My lemon cucumber. And these have all been getting sprayed with the peppermint spray, if you've seen the video that I just actually put together a couple hours ago. And it's doing extremely, extremely well, or it's extremely helpful in taking care of my beans, my squash, and my cucumbers. Here's the rest of the garden real quick. Not too shabby. The zucchinis are doing extremely well. Again, you can see the blight on the bottom of the leaves, but they're getting sprayed regularly. Brussels sprouts, some kale, spinning over this way. Finally, my fig tree completely survived the season, and I've been picking brown figs out of here and eating them. I haven't had any for 3 years because the winter has been so tough that it was killing this plant back to the roots, which it survived, but there was never second year wood for the figs to really develop, and you can see a couple of them right there. This is my okra, and you can see the okra growing right there. It's delicious. Don't worry about okra being too slimy if you eat it raw or you use it that way. It seems to get a little bit more slimy when you cook it. More peppers, beans. A lot of stuff is doing really well. I'm just a little bit disappointed overall with how the tomatoes fared. This is one perennial bed that I have to bring pollinators into my garden area. And let's go ahead and move up there onto the deck and finish up. I've been having a lot of success growing eggplant in containers. You can see how well that they're doing. And again, here is one of the eggplant. This one's ready to get picked this week. They're doing very, very well. I am getting a couple of flea beetles on here. I sprayed this with peppermint oil. I will take care of that with some dust if needed, but I'm seeing how the peppermint oil works. And when we come up to the deck, here is a midnight snack tomato like the one I just showed down there. It's doing really well. It's growing in a self-watering container, which I'll talk about when this plant's a little bit bigger. But this is a really well-designed self-watering container. It costs a little bit of money, but it's certainly worth it because it is taking care of this plant without me having to do anything to it really. But look how great the leaves look. They're much larger than the one that is actually right down there that's being shot for the video. This was the plant that was growing next to it. I don't know if you've been watching that series, but I had one growing next to it, pulled it out of the ground, put it right into here, and it's doing very, very, very well. Coming across this way, These are my Bradley tomatoes. They're all going to get picked. This has been dealing with the blight also, but you can see all the new green growth coming. So I'm sort of catching up and getting a handle on it. So I'm going to be taking care of these plants, pruning them back, and really getting them ready to thrive and grow. Maybe not over the next 3 weeks and produce anything, but over the next 3 weeks, get some of their foliage back, get established, and then through August and September, I'll be getting tomatoes. Now here is the yellow tomato I was talking about. There's one planted right here in this container, and it's had all this dieback that is problematic when the heat got high. Also had it in another place in my garden that I just walked through. Both plants had this dieback. The ones in the ground were was a little bit worse off. I had to pull it out. But for instance, this yellow pear just doesn't do well in my environment, so it's not going to be planted again next year. And keep track of it. Again, keep a journal and it'll let you know what works, what doesn't work. This is a Mr. Stripey that I just dropped in there. Again, put out some tomatoes now. If you've got, a good 60 to 75 days worth of warmth, no frost, and you will sort of jump through any plants that have been problematic with disease, because sometimes the younger plants just don't get the diseases. And then the temperatures change. And when the temperatures change, the diseases are no longer prevalent because it's not the right conditions. So all of a sudden, you'll have a great plant like Mr. Stripey thriving, while another plant was infected by the early blight. So you can kind of circumvent problems by starting tomatoes at different times. These are all sweet potatoes, doing really, really, really well. So this is a tour of my garden. I'm going to go through and harvest most of these tomatoes and some of the peppers, and I'll show you what I get out of there. But here is an overview of the rusted garden. Doing pretty good overall. The tomatoes, I'm a little disappointed, but every year is different. So here's the quick tour for July 23rd, and this is the harvest. Even though things aren't going as well as I want with the tomatoes, things are still coming out of the garden. Those are jalapenos right there, green beans, sweet peppers, Cocazel zucchini, cherry tomatoes, some larger tomatoes. These will all get processed into something delicious. Be able to eat this for the next 3 or 4 days while the rest of the garden produces. But in every zone, you're going to deal with your own diseases, your own insects. Just stick with it. Learn, keep a journal, keep track of what's going on. And each year you should be able to get a handle on it a little bit better. If there was a perfect way to be the perfect gardener, then there'd be no need to watch any kind of videos, because everybody would have a perfect garden. It's a lot of work, but it's really rewarding. Hope your garden is doing well for you. Please check out my garden shop at www.therustedgarden.com, and also check out my YouTube videos. Thanks.